Okay, think back to the really early internet days. Kind of felt like a digital frontier, right? And out there, you had these bits of software that were honestly pretty terrifying.
Absolutely. A real Wild West vibe.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into one of the legendary ones, SubSeven. This wasn't just some, annoying pop-up virus.
No, not at all. This was a RAT, a remote access Trojan.
Which basically means it could hand over the keys to your entire computer, your whole digital life, to a total stranger.
It's fascinating, really, how a piece of code from back when things were, let's say, less sophisticated online could get this almost mythical status.
Yeah, it had this mix of, like, surprising technical power for the time, but also this whole mystery around the creator.
The creator, Mobman.
Yeah.
Super elusive figure.
Right, and we've dug into some really interesting stuff for this. We're looking at articles about SubSeven's history, the chaos it caused, technical breakdowns, and definitely the Darknet Diaries podcast, which really brought this whole saga back to life recently.
Yeah, that podcast was key.
So our mission today basically is to try and unravel the truth behind SubSeven and this Mobman enigma. What's real, what's, just rumor.
Which brings up a big question, doesn't it? In that world of aliases and anonymity online,
Yeah.
how do you even know who's really behind something?
It's tricky. How do you separate fact from fiction?
Especially with something this old.
Well, for years, the story everyone knew or thought they knew was that this guy from Florida, Greg Hannis, was Mobman. He did interviews, built this whole persona.
Right, he was the public face for a long time.
But here's the twist. After almost 20 years of silence, the real Mobman apparently has surfaced, ready to, set the record straight. It's a pretty big correction to internet history.
Wow, okay, so a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. So let's start right at the beginning. What exactly was SubSeven?
Okay, so SubSeven first showed up around February 1999. And like you said, it's a remote access Trojan, a RAT.
The Trojan part is important, right?
Crucial. It's the classic Trojan horse idea. It couldn't spread on its own, like a virus. It had to trick you. It would pretend to be something legitimate, maybe a game update, a utility, some useful program. You'd download it, run it, thinking it was safe.
And boom, backdoor installed.
Exactly. It opens up unauthorized access to your Windows computer.
So it just sneaks in. And once it was inside, I read Steve Gibson, the security guy, described it as giving the attacker virtually complete control. That sounds intense for 99.
Oh, it was incredibly powerful for its time. And just to be clear on the Trojan versus virus thing again.
Yeah, good point.
A Trojan needs you to run it. It sits dormant until you activate it, maybe by copying the file and running it somewhere else. A virus tries to copy itself everywhere.
Got it. Silent infiltrator versus self-spreader. So this virtually complete control. What could an attacker actually do with SubSeven?
Well, SubSeven had this incredibly broad feature set. Honestly, it blew contemporaries like NetBus out of the water. The capabilities ranged from sort of annoying pranks right up to really serious damaging stuff.
Okay, let's hit the serious stuff first. What kind of damage are we talking?
Right, the malicious side. It could log every single keystroke you typed. Think about that.
Passwords, credit cards, private messages, everything.
Everything. Logged and sent straight back to the attacker. It also gave them total access to your files. They could delete stuff, change things, copy your private documents, basically just ransack your digital life.
Wow.
And it got worse. It could turn on your webcam, your microphone, without any warning light, any indication, just watching and listening.
That's creepy.
Super creepy. Screen capture, too, obviously. It could grab stored passwords from your system, mess with your computer settings, even install other malware.
Just piling on a truly nasty piece of software. But you mentioned pranks. That seems like a weird addition.
Yeah, it is a bit strange, isn't it? But SubSeven also had this whole suite of features for, let's call it, mischief.
Like what?
Things like changing your desktop wallpaper randomly, messing with the screen colors, opening and closing your CD-ROM drive over and over.
Oh man, I remember that being a thing. So annoying.
Totally. It could swap your mouse buttons, so left-click became right-click, turn your monitor on and off remotely. It even had a text-to-speech thing, so it can make the computer suddenly talk to you.
Okay, so it could steal your bank details and make your computer say weird stuff. That's versatile.
Quite the range, yeah.
Any other notable tricks up its sleeve?
Definitely. A big one, starting with version 2.1, was IRC control.
IRC, the old chat room.
Exactly. Integrating with IRC meant an attacker could control lots of infected machines at once from a chat channel. That was a huge step towards, the botnets we worry about today.
Right. Coordinating attacks.
Yeah. It also had a TCP tunnel feature for routing traffic, Password recovery for some apps came in later, a port scanner to find other vulnerable machines.
Oh, so it could help find new victims, too.
Potentially, yeah. Plus a port redirector, and even, get this, ICQ takeover.
ICQ. Wow, that takes me back. Really dates it, doesn't it? And the server part, the bit that ran on the victim's machine, that could be tweaked?
Yeah, attackers could customize it, change the network port it used, set custom messages when it started up to try and blend in, make it look like a normal system process.
Trying to hide in plain sight.
And there was this one really aggressive move. It apparently included code from something called Hard Drive Killer Pro.
That sounds bad.
It was designed to wipe drives. The story goes it was included specifically to target systems linked to someone who made a rival Trojan, like digital warfare between malware authors.
Jeez. It sounds incredibly powerful, but I also heard it was surprisingly easy to use.
That was a huge factor in its spread. SubSeven had a graphical user interface,
Yeah.
a GUI, point and click.
Unlike some of the older command line hacking tools.
Exactly. This lowered the bar massively. Suddenly, people with very little technical skill, the so-called script kiddies, could use this really potent weapon just by clicking buttons.
Making a dangerous tool accessible to way more people.
Absolutely. We saw a similar thing with Back Orifice around the same time. That ease of use just exploded the threat landscape.
Okay, powerful and user-friendly, bad combo. How did it change over time? You mentioned different versions.
Yeah, the evolution is pretty interesting. Version 1.0, Feb 99, Mobman puts it out. Pretty clearly inspired by Back Orifice, BO, Simple, single window interface.
Mobman was the original creator, we think, now?
Right, the real Mobman. He kept tweaking it through 99. Version 1.9, sometimes called Apocalypse, got a redesigned look. But the big leap was 2.1, June 99.
That was the IRC control one.
That's the one. Suddenly you could manage a whole bunch of infected machines easily. Game changer for attackers.
Turning individual compromises into potential networks.
Exactly. Then in 2001, there was this 2.2x branch. They tried making it modular, like with plugins, but it didn't really take off. Not enough people made modules for it.
So that fizzled out.
Kind of, yeah. The last version the original Mobman himself released was 2.1.5, around 2003, called SubSeven Legends.
Legends. Okay, so Mobman steps back around 2003.
Seems so. Though the SubSeven Legends website popped back up in 2006, offering downloads and community help, then things get a bit fragmented.
How so?
In 2010, version 2.3 appears. Not by Mobman, but by guys called Rid101 and FC. Apparently based on source code Mobman had shared somewhere.
Ah, so based on his work.
Right. It added support for newer Windows, TCP tunnel, password recovery, but reports say it was super buggy.
Not surprising if it wasn't the original author.
And then jump way ahead to 2021. A coder named DarkCoderS releases a total remake, version 2.2, rewritten from scratch, and he later made that source code public.
Interesting, like preserving a piece of history, maybe.
Possibly. And then, the most recent big event, October 2023, the official genuine source code for 2.1.2 and 2.1.3 gets released on GitLab.
By who?
By this guy Ill Will, but explicitly with the real Mobman's blessing.
Wow, so the original code finally sees the light of day, officially. It's quite a journey for a piece of software. Sounds like Mobman really wanted to outdo NetBus initially.
That definitely seems to be part of the motivation. Offer more features, more control. It's that classic malware arms race dynamic. One tool comes out, the next tries to top it. Happens constantly in cybersecurity.
Okay, so we know what it did, how it evolved. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. How did it actually work? How did it infect a machine and stick around?
Infection was usually through deception, like we mentioned. You'd download a file thinking it's safe, maybe from a shady website, maybe an email attachment that looked legit, or even from a hacked website.
Social engineering, basically.
Pretty much, or sometimes exploiting known security holes in other software. Once that server part, the Trojan, got executed on your machine, it would install itself.
And it needed to make sure it ran every time you booted up, right? Persistence.
Exactly. Persistence is key for RAT. SubSeven used a few tricks. It would modify old system files like system.ini, win.ini, added lines to make itself launch at startup.
The low-level stuff.
Yeah, and it hit the Windows registry hard. The registry is like the computer's main configuration database. SubSeven would add entries in specific places, like HK local machine software, Microsoft Windows current version run.
Standard places for auto-start programs.
Right, and run services. These are known spots where programs tell Windows, hey, run me automatically. Some later versions even dropped a little helper program, maybe called Windows.exe or something similar.
What did that do?
Its job was basically just to make sure the main SubSeven Trojan stayed running in the background, relaunching it if needed, sometimes tying it to whenever any .exe file was run. Really burrowing in.
Digging itself in deep. And how did it hide from the user and from early antivirus?
Stealth was obviously important. It tried to disguise its process name, make it look like a normal Windows thing. The attacker could customize startup messages to look harmless.
Like system update checker or something.
Exactly. Some versions would copy the main Trojan file into the Windows system folder, give it a random name, and then delete the original file you clicked on, covering its tracks.
Sneaky.
And being a RAT, it used more advanced tricks too. Mimicking legit processes, maybe using rootkit techniques to hide files and network activity, sometimes trying to encrypt its communication back to the attacker.
Trying to be a ghost in the machine. So how did the attacker actually talk to it, the command and control?
Right, CNC. Once SubSeven was running on your PC, it needed to phone home. It would connect back to a server the attacker controlled.
How did the attacker know they had a new victim?
It could send out a notification, often via ICQ or IRC, sometimes even email. That message would usually contain the victim's IP address, so the attacker knew where to connect.
ICQ and IRC again. It really grounds this whole thing in that late 90s, early 2000s internet vibe. Now, I remember reading something wild that SubSeven itself had a backdoor.
Yes. This is such an ironic twist. When people analyzed the code later, they found hard-coded master passwords built right in.
Master passwords for the Trojan itself.
Yep. For version 1.9, the password was apparently Predatox, and for versions 2.1 up to 2.2b, it was this long number: 144381367882715101980.
So, anyone who knew that password could take over any machine infected with that version of SubSeven.
Pretty much. Even if they weren't the person who originally infected the machine, you could hijack someone else's SubSeven victim.
The attacker getting attacked by their own tool, was that deliberate? Like Mobman leaving a way in for himself? Or just a mistake?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
It could have been deliberate. Maybe Mobman wanted ultimate control, or maybe it was a prank on the script kiddies using his tool,
Sure.
or maybe it was just a huge programming oversight.
A massive security hole in a security-breaking tool.
Exactly. It really speaks to maybe the less polished, more chaotic nature of software development back then, especially in the malware scene.
For sure. Now, SubSeven wasn't alone, right? You mentioned NetBus and Back Orifice earlier.
Right. That late 90s, early 2000s period was fertile ground for these RATs. They were getting easier to use, the internet was growing fast, security wasn't always great. NetBus and Back Orifice were the other big names.
How did they stack up against SubSeven?
Well, NetBus came out a bit earlier, 98, made by a Swedish guy, Carl Fredrik Nectar. Had remote control, file transfer, screen capture, keylogging. Pretty standard RAT stuff, but crucially, it had a point-and-click interface. Made it accessible.
And Back Orifice, BO.
Also 98. Released by the hacker group Cult of the Dead Cow, or CDC, they claimed it was to demonstrate Windows security flaws.
Plausible deniability.
Maybe. It did similar things. Remote control, file access, messing with the registry, controlling processes. Also had a fairly simple GUI, which again made it popular with less technical folks.
So where did SubSeven fit in this picture? Was it just another clone?
It definitely started with inspiration from them. Mobman apparently said early versions were BO clones. Even the name, SubSeven reverse NetBus, is SubSen. Change the 10 to a 7.
Ah, okay. Clever.
But SubSeven quickly aimed higher. Mobman wanted to add more features than NetBus, offer deeper control. Things like the webcamic access, the port redirection, and especially that IRC control later on. Those were big steps up.
So it evolved beyond just being a clone.
Definitely. It was actively developed by Mobman for years and arguably became more influential in the long run, especially with that IRC control paving the way for botnets.
Okay, so it was part of this whole ecosystem, this arms race. Now let's get back to the human element, the creator, Mobman. For the longest time, everyone thought it was Greg Hannes. Tell us about him and his story.
Right. Greg Hannes from Tampa, Florida, he was the guy who stepped into the spotlight claiming to be Mobman, and he had this whole origin story worked out.
What was his version? How did he become Mobman, according to him?
His story started with his Nintendo breaking as a kid, which supposedly sparked his interest in computers. Then he got heavily into the online game Ultima Online.
UO, yeah, classic.
He claimed his computer broke. He taught himself repairs, learned programming along the way. He talked about early hacks in UO, messing with the game, even making free phone calls somehow.
Okay, standard hacker origin tropes, maybe.
Sort of feels that way in retrospect.
Yeah.
His main claim for creating SubSeven was tied to Ultima Online. He said he needed a tool to steal specific configuration files, uo.cfg, to get other players' logins.
For cheating in the game.
Essentially, yeah. And he said the prank features were part of that early tool, just for messing with other players.
And there was another motivation he mentioned.
Yeah, separately, he talked about a big fight with AT&T over a $900 phone bill. He claimed this made him want to prove how insecure systems were, though he didn't directly link that to starting Sub7.
So gamer grievances and a beef with the phone company, that's his story. And he didn't just tell friends, he went public.
Oh yeah, big time. He got featured in Rolling Stone magazine as Sub7's creator. That's huge mainstream validation.
Wow, Rolling Stone.
He did interviews with local TV, CBS Miami, spoke at security conferences like B-Sides Tampa, where his bio flat out called him the original author of Sub7.
So he really built this public persona.
Absolutely. For years, if you looked up Mobman, you found Greg Hannes.
But, as we know now, there were cracks in the story. Doubts started creeping in.
Yeah, pretty early on, especially among people who knew the tech side. After he was on Darknet Diaries the first time, episode 20, listeners started picking holes in his story. People felt his technical explanations were kind of superficial. Like he didn't have the deep understanding you'd expect from someone who actually built something like Sub7. Timeline issues, too. Things not quite lining up with how the internet was back then.
And the Romanian connection.
That was a big one. There was always this persistent rumor that the real Mobman was Romanian. Hannes, being American, had no explanation for that.
Couldn't explain away the rumors.
Right. And the proof he offered,
Mm-hmm.
like owning the Sub7 domain name. The real Mobman later said Hannes probably just registered an expired domain, and the source code Hannes claimed to have. Turns out early versions had leaked online years before anyway.
So his proof wasn't really proof.
Not exclusive proof, no. But the real nail in the coffin probably was during that confrontation episode on Darknet Diaries number 150. He was asked about Delphi.
The programming language Sub7 was written in.
Exactly. And Hannes apparently sounded completely clueless about it, didn't know the basics.
Ouch. That's hard to fake if you supposedly wrote the thing. So the doubts grew. How did the actual investigation to find the real Mobman start?
A lot of it stemmed from that skepticism after Darknet Diaries 20. It really got people in the security community digging again.
And this is where ill will comes in.
Exactly, ill will. He claimed to be part of the original Sub7 crew back in the day. Knew the scene, knew the people.
So he had inside knowledge.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
And Hannes' story just didn't ring true to him. So ill will started this personal quest, digging through old forums, contacting old handles, trying to find the actual Mobman. Took him years.
Wow, dedicated.
Super dedicated. Eventually he found a lead, an old email address maybe, and managed to make contact. He found him.
Incredible. And ill will was the one who pushed Jack Rysider at Darknet Diaries to correct the story.
Yeah, he kept feeding Jack evidence, arguing, look, the history's wrong, we need to fix this. Which led to ill will doing a presentation at the B-Sides Connecticut Security Conference in October 2023.
Titled, Finding Mobman.
That's the one. And that's where the really concrete evidence came out.
What kind of evidence did he present?
Stuff he got directly from the real Mobman. Physical things from back in 1999. Things an imposter just wouldn't have.
Like?
An old Sub7 sweatshirt. A vintage notebook from '99 with the real Mobman's actual name and address in it.
Whoa, the actual notebook.
Yeah. Full of handwritten notes about developing Sub7. Feature ideas, version plans, notes on coding the port scanner, even sketches of the original Sub7 logo, references to internal code names they used, like Mew.
That's pretty undeniable, physical artifacts from the time.
Exactly. It just blew Hannes' claims out of the water. How could Hannes have that notebook?
No way. And then the source code itself.
Right. After that, and with the real Mobman's okay, ill will officially released the genuine source for versions 2.1.2 and 2.1.3 on GitLab.
The real deal, finally public.
Yep. Ill will had apparently shown Jack Rysider snippets before, and the real Mobman even offered up old backup CDs with the code on them during the podcast. This official release, with clear provenance tracing back to the guy ill will found, basically sealed it. The imposter narrative just collapsed.
So the evidence became overwhelming. Who is the real Mobman then? What's his actual story?
Okay, so the real creator is originally from a city called Craiova in Romania.
Ah, so the Romanian rumor was true.
It seems so. He moved to Windsor, Ontario, Canada in 1997, which is significant because...
Let me guess, something in Sub7 refers to Windsor.
Bingo. Early versions had the credit line from Windsor, Ontario buried in them. He was self-taught, Apparently started programming small games as a kid back in Romania before moving.
So a very different background. How did he get into making SubSeven?
When he got to Canada, he discovered Delphi, the programming language. He said creating an ORA was basically a project to learn Delphi, just messing around, seeing what he could do.
A learning exercise.
That's his claim. He was inspired by NetBus, wanted to see if he could build something similar, maybe better. His stated motivation initially was just all fun, making a tool for pranks, playing tricks online.
Which fits with those prank features we talked about.
It does align quite well. So in his telling, he's kind of an accidental malware author. He built this thing for fun, and it just took on this much darker life of its own.
All fun and pranks?
Yeah.
Until it wasn't. When did he realize people were using it for seriously bad stuff?
As it got more popular, he obviously saw it being used for data theft, spying, all the nasty things. He said he felt a bit detached, like, well, someone would make these tools anyway.
A bit of a justification, maybe?
Maybe. But he acknowledges that the widespread misuse did contribute to him wanting to step away. But the bigger factor, he says, was the legal climate changing around 2003, 2004.
Laws getting tougher on malware creation.
Exactly. He started getting worried about facing legal trouble for having created such a powerful tool. That fear, he says, was the main reason he just vanished from the scene and stayed anonymous for almost 20 years.
Understandable, I guess. So after nearly 2 decades hiding, why come forward now?
Number one reason, Greg Hannes claiming to be him. Apparently, a friend of the real Mobman's, still in Canada, heard that first Darknet Diaries episode with Hannes and was like, wait, what? That's not him.
So word got back to him.
Yep. And then Ill Will tracked him down, showed him the evidence he gathered, and made the case. Look, history has this wrong. Your creation had a huge impact. You should set the record straight.
And eventually he agreed.
Yeah, it took some convincing. But Ill Will's arguments, plus the annoyance of the impersonation, swayed him. He basically said, it didn't really make any sense to still stay hidden while this fake story was out there.
Which brings us back to that amazing 3-way call, Darknet Diaries 150. What actually went down in that confrontation?
It was pretty stunning. Jack Reisider got both the real Mobman and Greg Hannes on the phone together. The real Mobman just laid out the evidence.
Like the Windsor connection.
Exactly. He pointed to the "from Windsor, Ontario" tag, and also quotes from a Romanian hip-hop group, BUG Mafia, hidden in the credits.
Romanian hip-hop? Seriously?
Apparently. Details, Hannes just had no way of knowing or explaining. And when Hannes was pressed on Delphi,
he blanked.
Totally blank, reportedly. Sounded completely lost. His whole defense just fell apart on the call.
How did Hannes react?
He tried doubling down at first, then suggested maybe there were multiple creators. The real Mobman shot that down. Then Hannes kind of gave up, said he didn't care, and then came out with that bizarre, it was all a social engineering experiment line.
Wow. Desperation, maybe. It sounds like a clear victory for the real story.
Oh, absolutely. The contrast was just night and day. Real Mobman, Romanian roots, moved to Windsor, learned Delphi, initial sun motivation, backed by physical evidence, the source code, Hannes. No connection to Windsor or Romania, couldn't explain the clues, weak tech knowledge, no real evidence, it just didn't hold up.
So what happened after the big reveal? What's the fallout been like for Hannes and the real Mobman?
Well, Hannes is mostly stuck to his denial, pushing the social engineering angle. Which, most listeners and people online just haven't bought at all. People called it like a masterclass in bad lying.
Yeah, the experiment excuse sounds pretty thin after years of claiming authorship.
Right. His final public comment was weird, too. Something like, don't be like Mobman, not my fake Mobman. Very ambiguous. But the irony is, his whole impersonation act is what ultimately flushed the real Mobman out.
He accidentally brought the truth to light by lying. Wild. And the real Mobman.
He seems to have found some closure. He's reiterated the original Fun and Frank's intent, acknowledged the dark turn it took, and confirmed that the misuse and legal fears were why he vanished. He's just living quietly in Windsor now, moved on, but wanted history corrected.
And SubSeven itself? What's its lasting impact, its legacy, now that we know the real story?
It's left a pretty big footprint. At IRC control in 2.1, many see that as a crucial step, really setting the stage for the huge, malicious botnets that came later.
Yeah, the ability to control armies of infected machines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It also forced the cybersecurity world to up its game. Antivirus companies had to develop smarter detection, looking for suspicious behavior, heuristics, monitoring system changes, not matching known virus signatures.
Push defenses forward.
Definitely.
No.
And now, having the official source code, that's valuable for researchers studying malware history. Plus, you have things like that Dark Coders remake, trying to preserve it non-maliciously for study.
We can't forget the victims either.
Absolutely not. While maybe it sparked some interest in computers or security for a few people, countless others had their data stolen, were spied on, had their systems messed up. Real harm was done. Its legacy is complex. Technical influence, cybersecurity driver, historical artifact, but also a tool that caused real suffering.
It really drives home how important getting the history right is, even for these shadowy parts of the internet.
Totally. The whole SubSeven story shows how hard it can be to document this stuff, with all the anonymity. It shows how easily misinformation, even unintentional, can spread and stick, even in the media.
And highlights the work involved in actually correcting the record.
Yeah, hats off to people like Ill Will for the digging, and platforms like Darknet Diaries for being willing to revisit and correct their own reporting. That takes integrity.
So, yeah, the SubSeven story isn't just about code. It's about the people, the real creator, the imposter, the investigators. It's a human story wrapped in a digital mystery. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other bits of internet history have contested origins like this? What don't we know about our digital past?
It's a great point. A reminder to stay critical, question narratives, and appreciate the effort it takes to find the truth, however long it takes.
Definitely something to think about. If you want to go even deeper, check out that released source code, or definitely listen to those Darknet Diaries episodes. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.